So we have 0.25 grams of manganese dioxide in the boat, our side iron flask, running with a tube into a submerged 250 centimetre cube beaker, a stopwatch in the background, and our measuring cylinder to measure our hydrogen peroxide. So we put our hydrogen peroxide into our side iron flask already, make sure it's in there, and then we will add our catalyst and bung the top to make sure the gas goes through to our measuring cylinder. Prizes if you can spot the mystery arm that does the timer, if you know whose that belongs to. So we start the timer and ensure that the tube stays inside the measuring cylinder so that any gas that's produced is collected in the cylinder. Now, it doesn't start very quickly because you need to mix the catalyst in. As you can see, I'm shaking the conical flask to spread out the powder in amongst the hydrogen peroxide. And then the bubbles of gas obviously have to work their way through the tube so that they start coming through. So we're taking measurements roughly every 30 seconds. So the first one was about 15 centimetres cubed of gas. And as you can see, bubbles are coming out quite frequently now that we've managed to fill the actual tube with the air that's required. So at about this point, we're getting close to the 18 centimetre cube mark at about a minute. I promise I'm not going to make you watch all of this. If you know, this takes about 15, 16 minutes to get to the end, so we are going to cut bits, but I just want you to see that at the moment the bubbles are coming out quite frequently. We've just gone past our 18 centimetres cube mark in the first minute, and that as it collects, the water is being displaced, so we would call this a upward displacement, because the gas is going upwards. So we're doing an upward displacement, and we're using water so that we can measure how much of the gas has come through. So shortly we're going to cut to a little bit later in the experiment, and hopefully you'll spot that the bubbles are not coming up quite as often. So you should be able to see that there is nearly 30 centimetres cubed in there now, as we're getting close to the 1 minute mark. So now we're at 4 minutes. Obviously we've collected a bit more gas, we're a bit further down the thing now, but as you can tell, there just aren't as many bubbles coming up as there were before. There's quite big gaps in between each one of the bubbles coming up. Why does this happen? Well, it's not the catalyst being used up. As we know, the catalyst doesn't get used up in the reaction. It does get involved in the reaction, but it doesn't change as it goes on. This is because as the reaction is happening, our concentration of the hydrogen peroxide is going down. And you know from your previous experiments that concentration affects rate of reaction, because the lower the concentration gets, the less particles there are to collide, so there are less collisions per second, so the rate of reaction will slow down. So you should find, when you collect all the results at the end and go and do your graph analysis for your next lesson, that you should get a curve, because the reaction should slow down over time, not because the catalyst is disappearing, but because the amount of hydrogen peroxide has gone down, our concentration has changed. So still reasonably frequent bubbles at this point. They will slow down, definitely. We obviously waited for the reaction to finish, so think about how we would know when the reaction has finished. What do we usually look for to say that the reaction has stopped happening? So we are now 10 minutes in. You can tell there isn't a huge amount of oxygen being produced here. We're around the 91, 94 mark at the moment, ready for the 10-minute 30 mark. And obviously it is getting slower and slower over time because there is less and less hydrogen peroxide in there. So we should make a jump very shortly towards the end, and you should have, if you've been thinking about this, worked out how we knew it was the end of the reaction. Two methods you could pick. The one that we went for is when the volume does not change anymore for 3 consecutive measurements. So at the 15-minute mark, we had 110 centimetres cubed. It had just changed from 108 to 110. So we're now waiting to see definitely less bubbles now than there were at the beginning coming up. So you just wait to see, are we getting a different measurement? So we've gone the full 30 seconds, no gas, it's still on 110. So we've now had 2 measurements where there is no change in volume. And as usual with all great experiments, just before you think you're going to get your third measurement that doesn't change, the reaction will throw out a couple of bubbles for you just to make you think, oh no, we have to carry on again. But actually this is such a small bubble that appears, it doesn't actually change the measurement. So the measurement is still 110, so we finish the reaction at 16 minutes. And here are your results for you to copy down into your results table, ready for next lesson, guys.